Thank you very much. I want to observe all protocol and say I'm honored to be here. And I note there's a number of friends in this space, so I feel very much at home. I think the Open Helsinki theme has felt the personal hospitality that I've enjoyed so far, so thank you very much for this. Now, just picking up on the theme that started in the morning, and I'm very inspired to be here because Victor Papanek, as a student, was one of the chief reasons why I moved into the space of socially conscious design. And watching the kind of legacy that we can now reflect on is personally very satisfying. And then again, on a personal note, and as Alistair says, we're on the same time zone, but we're in totally different seasons. So I'm hoping to bring a bit of summer for you here. And so the yellow, among other things, should give you an indication of where I'm coming from. We're at about 25 degrees right now in Cape Town. I'd also like to salute any of the friends in Cape Town that might be watching this. So thank you. So very quickly, if I can now proceed, I'd like to just give you a very quick introduction to what I'd call the African traditional worldview. So this is the African worldview 101. Very quick, and by no means can I do justice to the entire ethos in this time, but I'd just like to give you a snapshot. So the first thing is about dynamism and vitalism is the fact that the closer you are to something, the more energy you draw from it. So my being here is obviously, as much as we have virtual technologies for teleconferencing, means that there's a much more powerful and personal encounter, which I appreciate. And then if you see the crafts, you'll notice that there's from other aesthetic traditions, and I was interested in hearing how beauty was not discussed. But if one looks at the aesthetic traditions, much of African carvings seem to be grotesque in that sense, because one wonders, do you not have a more subtle appreciation of beauty? But the basic philosophy is one of distinction between the sexes, the distinction, like Lo was speaking of the yin and the yang. So there's a very clear, as much as there's a complementarity, there's a desire to be clear about the message one is communicating. And then the second point, which I think is quite relevant to this particular seminar we have, is one of solidarity and the manner in which people related and still relate to one another, to the environment, and to everything that makes them human. And in that sense, participation and the sense of totality, the holistic way in which things were viewed is quite an important principle. Then the sacred, the interconnectivity between that which came before us, that which is present, and that which will come. So that is really part of that, and that why one has that respect. And then a related principle is a concept we call Batu Pele, which means people first, literally. It does. And people come first in everything. There's a saying that the last mile is a human mile. And it's very much a case in Africa where no matter what systems you come up with, eventually you have to deal with the human factor. And so that's a critical element, and that human dignity in all its various nuances must be respected. That no project or process should subjugate the human will and frustrate the human aspiration. So having said that, there's a couple of related thoughts which I'll not go into, but one of them is the concept of African time, which I think for the benefit of those who are constantly frustrated by this thing called African time, which essentially means, to paraphrase it, that there's no hurry in Africa. But the reason is, if you look at the philosophy of time, as whether it's a cyclic or the linear, in the African traditional worldview, the cyclic time view was very much the current practice. And so, because again, if you link it back to people first, is if I'm on my way, me as an example, to an important meeting and I meet someone who I know who has an issue, I might be late for the meeting because this person that I meet deserves my time, and therefore, unfortunately, the linear understanding of time suffers. Fortunately, I'm here to celebrate the other appreciation of time, which is more linear. And then a very important ethos, as I mentioned, is what we call Ubuntu, which means humanness or humaneness. And I won't say it in the Zulu or Swahili, but essentially what it means is that a person is a person through other persons, which sounds nonsensical if you say it as quickly as I did. But if you pause at every person, you start to see that you're moving at different levels and different degrees of connection between entities. So I am humanized through my relationship with other people, and that each of your humanity is inextricably linked to my own, and that I am less human if I do not acknowledge your humanity. So essentially that's what that principle of Ubuntu means. And if you look at the basic root of the word, the Ntu bit, you'll notice it is at the root of everything in the African worldview, you know, from things to phenomena to people to places. It's a core thing, the core principle. And then in a nutshell, I'm sure you've heard of the top one, which is I am because we are. And just picking up on Alistair's point earlier on about the I and the we, this is a slight twist on the Cartesian logic of I think, therefore I am. But in our case, we believe that I am because we are. So the common aspiration and the common expression of what we stand for becomes, in a sense, an affirmation of my own and vice versa. So the me and the we is constantly being negotiated, and there's no apparent contradiction between those two principles in terms of practice. And then my favorite expression, which is Ubuntu specific, is the second one, which is not just about the existential issue of being, why am I here and who am I, but more importantly that I participate, therefore I am. And this is encouraging because it's inclusive. It means as long as you respond to the invitation to participate, you have humanized that call, and therefore you are human, and therefore you are one with the rest. So this is an important point, and it links directly to issues like collaborative work, participatory design, and so on, which are very close to the agenda of this meeting. And so you can see now how from I am because we are, and I participate, therefore I am, we very quickly move into the community-focused exercises and initiatives and activities that are quite common for those of you that have had the privilege of engaging with the African peoples. And whether it's in Eastern Africa or Southern Africa, you'll find that the words around the space, the physical space where people meet, including the point about Indaba or Baraza or Lekgotla, as it's called up in Botswana and elsewhere, you'll find that this physical space for that people meet and the actual name for the dialogue itself that occurs is essentially synonymous. So there's no distinction between the physical space and the virtual or interactive dialogue that happens. And then again, in the second bullet there, you can see the systems of collective response and mutual assistance and the different names that it has. Some of you may have heard of some more famously than others because of your different leanings. And then very quickly, I'd like now then to move this conversation from that African traditional worldview 101 very quickly to the theme of the World Design Capital. And I'm really honored to be here in this very auspicious year for Helsinki. And just to pick up on where it's moved on, what it is, I'm sure most of you who've been involved intimately in the process know that it's about celebrating the manner in which design does demonstrate the various levels of quality of life improvement for its citizens. And that since Torino, I'm very also aware we have the ambassador from South Korea. Seoul was the World Design Capital in 2010. And so just what I've done deliberately is because when one looks at a city, they're typically distracted by either natural beauty or people. So I've taken pictures of the different cities at night, just to hopefully bring a more common denominator to the process. So that would be Torino. And when we look at the heritage, Torino does have a very rich design heritage that's incontestable in that sense. We know it's a home of Fiat and many other exciting things that happen there. Then I move to the next one, which is Seoul, which is, again, some of the biggest and most recognizable brands, particularly in consumer products, coming from Seoul as we speak. And if you notice the different sub-themes in which the different cities are focused. And then to Helsinki, which is the current world design capital, the home of Nokia, which is, I think, in the African context, is the biggest selling mobile phone. I think up to 66% of all mobile phones on the continent are Nokias, which is a good challenge for the others and also to emulate and learn how it is that Nokia has been able to service the base of the pyramid needs, as well as go to the very high-end smartphones, which bridges those divides. And so if one was just to very quickly summarize, and this is by no means doing justice to the very detailed campaigns and very well conceived design projects that have been run in the World Design Capital, I've taken some liberty and some economy, if you may, and please indulge me if you may. And so we're looking at Torino that displayed design through all. So it's the saying that design needs to start to be seen in everything that Torino is about. So it's not just about Fiat, it's also about the cultural life, it's about everything the city stands for. Seoul was a little more specific because they picked on universal design as one of the key demonstrators of good design. And so design for all is synonymous with universal design or inclusive design. And so it brought all these various categories of consumer groups and user groups that are typically neglected in the traditional design methodologies. And then Helsinki is about embedding design. So I see design in all things, which again is a very positive development in that sense. So based on that very quick synopsis, if you may, of the three previous and reigning design capitals, I want to now focus my last bit of presentation on Cape Town's bit. And just to bear in mind what has been discussed up to this point elegantly leads into my conversation. And I want to thank all the previous presenters because they've made that task that much easier. Because this is what our theme is, as you can see. Live design, transform life. So it's about the potential of design to transform life. I have to start with a disclaimer for the sake of, can I say, integrity and also authenticity. That Cape Town cannot claim to have the same level of design heritage as some of the very outstanding cities that I've just presented. But what we did recognize immediately is the transformative power of design. And if we go back to the initial presentations that Yuri and others have spoken of today, it's about how socially responsible or socially conscious design can indeed transform the lives of its people. The process itself, just bidding, gave us an opportunity to audit our design activities. And for the first time in the history of Cape Town, we discovered that there was a lot more design activity than we realized. And what happened is then we discovered we had over 1,000 design and other creative industry clusters in the city. So we produced a 465-page bid book, which is the most monumental task yet in design, in auditing our talents. And in the spirit of doing everything in the night, not under the cover of darkness, hopefully, that would be the city of Cape Town without Table Mountain. Otherwise, it would be unfair to everyone else if I did put Table Mountain there. And to start to talk about less about stuff, because we have to re-educate our people about design. And the first constituency that needs that re-education is the design community itself. That design is not just about being a handmaiden to consumption. That design is something that does indeed address the wicked problems that we know design to engage with. These problems that are not necessarily elegant and attractive, but need to be addressed. And then the need to promote inclusion, social inclusion, and hopefully in the process to also promote social equity and cohesion, because we've inherited a system where, because of apartheid, designers of that era were part of the problem. And we're saying now designers of our generation and the future generations need to become part of the solution. So this rethinking of the role of design for us is not just an exercise in theory, but it's actually about reshaping the future of design and how it engages with people. And then also to emphasize participatory processes, and also emphasizing the transformative potential of design, and therefore the theme, live, design, transform life. The benefits for the city are not like the ones we've discussed in previous years. And then just to give you an idea, of course, Cape Town is Africa's leading tourism destination, and we do want to maintain that still. But we're saying it's beyond tourism. There's a lot more that design can do. It can bring about a new understanding of how the 21st century works, 21st century city works. Secondly, we know for a fact that 90% of the world can somehow relate to the realities that Cape Town presents. It has very unique, advanced and industrially developed realities there, and as well as very dire circumstances for some of our citizens. So that becomes a challenge. And just also picking up on the richness of the culture and the crafts, and some of the projects we've engaged with friends like the Mulo project with the Polytechnic di Milano. They came down and we've been doing a joint project on sustainable mobility. And then juxtaposing that with the traditional rickshaws you find in Durban and other cities. And we also have built Africa's first electric vehicle. And yet that is the reality of most of the village folk. And how do you, you've heard of horsepower, I'm sure you can relate to donkey power as well. And also just looking at how projects can start to engage with that have a community focus, and the community doesn't just embellish the facades, but they actually are involved in the building. So we have buildings projects where the community co-builds from the ground up, even before that the co-design happens, but they actually help co-construct the housing themselves, much more dignified housing. It's called the Violence Prevention through Urban Upgrading, or the VPUU. And what happened in this particular township called Khayelitsha outside of Cape Town is this project helped to change and to reduce the crime rates, particularly violent crimes, by up to 40% through design intervention. And finally, to look at how we can actually focus on these issues. And I now wish to conclude in the next slide or so. And to say, so if Cape Town then can be participatory, and if you notice the with all is emphasized. So the invitation, and we've already had many wonderful discussions about taking legacy projects forward from this meeting, is to do things with Cape Town. And lastly, to say that what happens in Africa also has a universal flavor. And you'll notice the Ndebele women from South Africa and that juxtaposition of the Paduang women of Myanmar. Something very similar, yet you think the worlds apart. And this is my concluding slide. So just to say that we need to have this mediation between actors so as to start to appreciate the possibilities and how the community can generate ideas from this dialogue, how to foster social equity and cohesion. Negotiation is a very key word, just as transformation has been. And looking at clear obligations, because we need to manage expectations in the process. And also to look at how we can formulate comprehensive, sustainable, community-supported strategies, because we need to leave the legacy of the World Design Capital with the people and the communities in Cape Town, and then hopefully have a much happier future to look forward to. Thank you for your time.